That's right, friends. Good morning, good morning. We've hit 100 days of House Republicans in the majority, and the American people have very little to show for it. The steady progress we're making, jobs are up, inflation is cooling, and the cost of life-saving medications are down is a result of House Democrats working with the Biden-Harris administration. At the same time, the urgent challenges our country is facing have been made worse by Republican extremism. Congressman Morgan McGarvey is here today to talk with us about the horrific shooting in his community and why we cannot afford to let House Republicans continue to put guns over our kids. And Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher and Pat Ryan are here to talk about the disastrous ruling in Texas that is another step toward a national abortion ban that Republicans have promised. All three of these members are incredible public servants who consistently put people over politics. House Democrats have a plan to address these two crises: pass common sense gun legislation and keep weapons of war off the streets and restore the rights that women have through the Women's Health Protection Act. And the American people are with us on these issues. In the next 100 days, House Republicans need to put aside their extremism and start governing on behalf of the American people. I'd like to turn it over to Vice Chair Ted Lieu.
Thank you, Chairman Aguilar. Where is the Republican budget proposal? Democrats, weeks ago, put out a budget. President Biden's budget is going to slash the deficit by $3 trillion and continue to have America lead in 21st century. And President Biden has a track record of slashing. He slashed it by $1.7 trillion. We think it's a great budget proposal. Now, Republicans don't have to like it, but they got to at least have a counter. They have to at least put out what they want, or else we can't even negotiate. So I'll give you an analogy. It's like, let's say we're negotiating the price of a car, and you offer $27,000 for the car. And then weeks later, the other side comes and says, why are you stalling? And you're like, WTF, I just offered you. So we need to know what the Republican counteroffer is. And instead of working on that important issue, instead of trying to avert a debt limit crisis or working on the scourge of gun violence, what are they going to do? They're going to put on the floor of the House a bill to ban some transgender kids from participating in sports. This is not where the American people are at. And this is a creepy bill. The only way to enforce this bill is to empower school officials to inspect the genitals of kids. This is a creepy bill. Let's work on actual things that matter to American people: the debt limit, protecting Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, reducing the scourge of gun violence. And we have Morgan McGarvey here from Kentucky, who's going to talk about reducing gun violence.
Good morning. Thank you to Chairman Aguilar, to Vice Chairman Lieu for having me here today. 1 week ago, my hometown of Louisville, Kentucky, was ripped apart by two mass shootings. The first was at Old National Bank, where a gunman walked in and killed 5 innocent people, injured 8 others, including LMPD officer Nick Wilt, who is still struggling after being shot with an AR-15 in his head. The grief didn't go away. Just a few days later, Louisville suffered its second mass shooting where 6 people were shot and 2 people were killed, including a 17-year-old boy in Chickasaw Park in Louisville. I am heartbroken for my community. We have lost moms, dads, children, spouses, friends, loved ones, our neighbors, to senseless acts of gun violence. Louisville is such a close-knit community. We are 1 degree of separation away from everybody. When we ask you what school you went to, we mean high school. I lost my good friend Tommy Elliott in the shooting at Old National Bank and knew several others who were shot or who miraculously managed to escape unharmed. There have been 160 mass shootings in 2023 alone. That is more mass shootings than there are days in this calendar year. We cannot accept this as normal. I was here in Washington, D.C. last Monday when news of the shooting broke. I happened to have my kids with me. I needed to get back to the district immediately, and so there was no sugarcoating it. And I said, I have to go. There's been a mass shooting. And all the color drained from my 5th grade daughter's face. And she looked at me and she said, oh no, which school? That shouldn't be the reaction from our children. And the next day at school, when my wife dropped her off, she looked back in the car and said, please be safe at work, Mommy. In what world is this normal? That we are dropping our kids off at school afraid for their safety and they are afraid for ours. Last week, tearfully at a press conference, Dr. Jason Smith, the trauma surgeon at the University of Louisville, said, we are weary. We are weary from going out into the waiting room and telling someone their loved one isn't coming home and hearing the screams of mommy and daddy. We are doing nothing, and that's not working. Please help. We have to do more. Take my word for it. Take the word for it from the other members of Congress who have suffered the same thing in their communities, where their communities are grieving and their friends and families and neighbors are grieving. Enough is enough. We have to do more to keep our communities safe, and doing nothing isn't working. We must put public safety over guns. We must put kids over guns. We must put people over guns and act to keep all of our communities safe and to keep this from happening again. Thank you. Now I'll pass it off to my colleague and friend, Lizzie Fletcher from Texas.
Good morning. With the unprecedented order issued in the Northern District of Texas, my home state of Texas is once again at the epicenter of efforts to take away our freedom to make our own decisions about our bodies, our families, our futures, and to deprive us of access to services, information, and care that enable us to do that. The Fifth Circuit panel's partial stay order of the Northern District order reinforces the dubious legal arguments in the lower court's ruling and deeply flawed opinion. It undermines the FDA's drug approval process and limits access to mifepristone for too many Americans who need it. Now we await an emergency ruling from the Supreme Court, where the Department of Justice has taken action to defend the FDA's scientific judgment and to protect Americans' access to mifepristone and to safe and effective reproductive health care. The Supreme Court made the right decision to stay the prior court's rulings on Friday. The lower court rulings jeopardize the health, dignity, and freedom of women and families across the country in all 50 states. And that's why I am so glad to join my friend, Congressman Pat Ryan, in introducing the Protective Reproductive Freedom Act. Since mifepristone received FDA approval more than 20 years ago, women across America have used it for abortion care, including for miscarriage treatment. And it is used in more than half of all abortions in the states where abortion remains legal today. It is critical that we do everything we can to preserve and protect the FDA's authority to approve safe and effective medication in general, and this abortion medication in particular. The Protecting Reproductive Freedom Act expresses the sense of Congress that medication abortion was appropriately approved and is appropriately regulated by the FDA, and addresses the limitations reinstated by the court rulings requiring in-person dispensation of the medication. I want to thank Chair Aguilar and Vice Chair Lieu for highlighting this important issue and this legislation, and I am pleased to turn over the podium to Representative Ryan to tell you more about it.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Congressman Fletcher. Thanks to my colleagues. Thank you, Chair, for having us here. I love this country. I risked my life for this country, for the core American freedoms and rights that all of our previous generations risked their lives for, rallied for, protested for. And it breaks, being here, hearing this, breaks my heart. As someone that loves this country, that rights are being ripped away, that kids are being killed, this is a core issue of freedom. And the Democrats are proudly, clearly, unequivocally standing for freedom, in particular, reproductive freedom. And it's now very clear, they used to try to be subtle about it, but it's now very clear that the far right is hell-bent on a national abortion ban. And this is a moment where all Americans should be outraged that after centuries of advancing and giving more rights to our fellow Americans, we have people trying to rip them away. I have faith in the American people. We've seen this now in election and referendum after referendum, from Kansas to a special election that I unexpectedly, to many, won in August in New York, to Mary Peltola in Alaska, to a few weeks ago in Wisconsin. The American people want freedom, particularly reproductive freedom. Women don't want to be told by a politician or a doctor what to do with their bodies and in their private healthcare decisions. So I'm proud to stand with my colleague, Congresswoman Fletcher, with all my Democratic colleagues, and say we are for reproductive freedom, and we are going to have to double down and triple down in this fight, because just a few days ago in Florida, an even more extreme ban was passed, and we know that other states are doing the same. So I want the American people to know we are with you, we hear you, and we're going to continue to fight to protect your rights and freedoms. And thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Representative Ryan. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is a question for you and Vice Chair Lieu. Since both of you are part of the California delegation, I just want to get your thoughts on Senator Dianne Feinstein. Had two caucus members last week call for her to resign. Do you share their view?
I think it's up to Senator Feinstein to decide her own timeline. She is a legend in California politics and a legend in the Senate chamber. The work that she has done specifically on gun violence should be commended by all of us, and the work that she has put in over the last few decades representing the people of San Francisco and the people of California. But I will say that our expectation as House Democrats is that every senator is going to need to participate as we stave off House Republican attempts to get closer to default. So I look forward to her coming back, and I look forward to her service, but she should get to choose that timeline.
I agree with Chairman Aguilar, and let me just add that shingles can be quite debilitating. If you're over the age of 50, you should talk to your doctor about getting the shingles vaccine. And in America, we don't tell people to resign because they got shingles.
Question? Here.
Some House Democrats' favorite House Republican, George Santos, announced he's running for re-election. Curious for your reaction and the likelihood or possibility of Democrats taking back that seat next year.
Obviously, that's probably a question better equipped for. I think I'd have stronger thoughts if we were across the street. But as somebody who occasionally looks at FEC reports, I think I'd like our chances in that type of election. But broadly, George Santos is just one of the extreme individuals. He just has a less of a comparatively less of a passing relationship to the truth, and that's saying a lot to some of the others. But I think as we get closer to November, as we get closer to filing deadlines, I look forward to New York Democrats' attempts to win that seat and others within the state. But clearly, it's a very flawed individual who's under investigation from a number of entities, and we'll let the political chips fall where they may.
Vice Chair Lieu said that you all want to work on actual things that matter, like the debt ceiling. I'm wondering, what conversations are you having with House
We have our plan. We have our proposal. President Biden proposed a budget. We're happy to have conversations about deficits and about our annual spending. Those conversations are perfectly equipped to be discussed in the Budget Committee and in the Appropriations Committee. That's what we do every year. We talk about how much we're going to spend. We set top line numbers. We empower appropriators in the 12 bills to go through and have those bipartisan conversations. Bless you. And then we go over to then we send it over to the Senate. And then where there's a compromise or a disagreement, we weigh through that. 3 times in the last administration, we avoided default. Democrats and Republicans, in a clean way, we had those bills. In the last administration, why is this any different? Why is it only different when a Democrat holds the White House that Republicans feel empowered to want to assault Social Security and Medicare and spending in a number of other areas? It's mind-boggling to me. So House Democrats stand ready and willing to engage and to have conversations in a bipartisan manner to stave off this crisis, this Republican manufactured crisis, when the time comes. Chad.
Yes, thank you. Going back to Senator Feinstein and what you both just said a few minutes ago here, can you walk us through the mentality of members? We've seen a number of members get sick, have various health issues. Senator Fetterman was just out for a couple of months here. But historically, and this goes back decades, that there's always been a resistance of members to step in and say to fellow members when it's causing a problem on the floor, causing a problem in committee, which is the case with Senator Feinstein, to intervene and say, hey, it might be time to go. You say it's not, worth having somebody resign over shingles, but what about the operational part of that, and why are members historically unwilling to intervene when it comes to health?
I think we still are unwilling to engage when it comes to members' health. We have members in the House Democratic Caucus who have surgeries planned and have medical issues that need to be tended to. We give them the space. We send them the private encouragement that they need. We wish them back. Those are the things that we do as colleagues. What you have heard us say is no different than that. If there are members who say otherwise, you should talk to those members. What I'm here to say is, our expectation is that, our colleagues in the other chamber, do their work when it's time and when they are back and when they are healthy. We welcome back any of our colleagues. This morning at the House Democratic Caucus, we welcomed back Joaquin Castro, who had health issues, just like the Senate welcomed back Senator Fetterman. That's no different than what's happening here. If there are other members, you should take it up with those members. Anything else?
Answered it well.
Back.
Thank you. On guns, Republican leaders are not going to bring anything to the floor. So with that in mind, what can you do as a minority? I understand that we're talking about that this morning in the caucus. Is it just discharge position time? Is this just a messaging debate that we've seen over and over in the past? Or, should the Senate, which is controlled by your party, start pushing something to the floor? What do you want to happen?
We want action. We continue to stand for action on this issue. I'll ask Congressman McGarvey to talk a little bit as well. But what I would say is, we also passed bipartisan gun safety legislation in the last Congress. One of the things we need to do is appropriate those dollars. Dollars that can go to states to help them stand up their red flag laws, those who aren't participating, dollars that can go to community organizations. Those are the types of things that we can do and that we should do in a bipartisan way. We all would like to do more. I personally would like to do more, but we understand the constraints in working in when the Senate needs 60 votes. But House Democrats continue to stand for solutions. And this isn't just a messaging conversation. This is real life. And what we want to do is pass meaningful gun safety legislation at every turn that helps our kids and helps our communities. I'll ask Representative McGarvey and then Vice Chair Lieu.
Thank you, Chairman Aguilar. And yes, as I said earlier, 160 mass shootings already this year. people's lives are not a messaging tool. This is something that is impacting every community in America. It's impacting schools and workplaces and churches and places where people go for entertainment. We made progress last year in the 117th Congress with the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, and we need to build on that progress. 74% of Americans think that gun violence is a major issue. We just did a survey in my district where we surveyed over 3,000 people, and the number 2 issue was gun violence. This is before we had 2 mass shootings in Louisville, Kentucky. So we're trying to come up and find ways where people can meet us to do this. We know the American public wants universal background checks. We're trying to find ways to solutions that make people safer. And so this is not a messaging tool. This is not a messaging debate. This is as serious as people's lives, and making sure that there are fewer people and fewer communities that have to deal with the grief and the collateral damage that comes from gun violence. And I think we're going to do all we can to make that happen.
Can I follow up real quick? You don't have a red flag law in Kentucky. Does these shootings increase the pressure or the momentum behind that effort in your view?
I hope so. I was in the state Senate for 10 years before getting elected to Congress. I served as minority leader the last 4 I was there. One of my constituents, a woman named Whitney Austin, lives in Louisville, was walking into Cincinnati 4 or 5 years ago and was shot 12 times as she was going into work in the mass shooting they had in Cincinnati. She survived. She and I worked on a version of a red flag bill in Kentucky, the Crisis Aversion Rights Retention Bill. I had bipartisan support, and not just from Republicans. Sometimes in a state like Kentucky, you get an urban and a rural divide as well. I had rural Republican support for this bill that would give law enforcement a tool to temporarily remove a firearm from someone who is an immediate threat to themselves or to others. As more continues to come out on the shootings in Louisville. And I do know the investigation is dynamic, but more will be coming out. I hope that we can continue to build the consensus to have this tool, again, that keeps people safe. We need to have a holistic conversation on guns. If we're going to have a holistic conversation on guns, let's face it, 60% of the gun deaths in this country and in my state come from death by suicide. And this is an area where those laws have proven particularly effective. We've got to find consensus there. We have to have the Republicans coming in and willing to work with us on these solutions to these problems that we can solve. I echo again the words of the trauma surgeon in Louisville. We're doing nothing, and that's not working. And we need them to come to the table and help us pass these laws that will keep people safe. Vice Chairman Lieu.
I think it's instructive to see what the Republicans did the day after the Covenant School shooting. So the Biden administration has a regulation banning basically pistol braces that make AR-15s more lethal and other guns more lethal. And the Republicans had a markup on the bill that was going to reverse this and basically make it easier for people to get pistol braces. So they canceled that markup the day after the shooting. But why would they do that? Because they believe that giving more guns and making them more lethal makes America safer. They would have held this markup and defended their position. They would have said, give us more AR-15s, more pistol braces, more guns. That will make everybody safer. They would have held that markup, but they canceled it. They ran because they knew that their philosophy is the wrong one, because it clearly has not worked. We need to do something.
So House Republicans have put a bill on the floor this week banning transgender women from participating in women's sports in school. You've seen a record number of bills in state houses rolling back transgender rights. How do you think this issue is going to play when voters go to the polls next year? And will House Democrats have a bill codifying transgender rights for women in sports as part of the plan?
Well, let's talk about what this bill does. I mean, this is Republican culture wars going into our classrooms from Washington, D.C. There are already rules and there are already organizations who are taking the lead on this. The NCAA, the International Olympic Committee, both have guidelines and rules for participating in sports. This is about banning kids from playing sports. And as Vice Chair Lieu said, ask our Republican colleagues how you're going to determine that. How are they going to inspect that? A lot of us up here, all of us up here have kids. A lot of them played sports. What are they comfortable doing? Are they comfortable, are Republicans advocating for coaches to inspect young women? Are they comfortable for a referee or an athletic director? That's what this is about. And so if you have a young daughter playing sports, you should be incredibly concerned about this bill because that's the next step. And that's what Republicans should be asked is how you implement this. What is the next step? And that's why Republicans have vetoed this. And in the House Democratic Caucus this morning, Mark Takano, as well as Whip Clark, read portions of Governor Cox's veto statement in Utah. He vetoed this bill, and I wanted to just read a passage. And he said, finally, there's one more important reason for this veto. I must admit, I'm not an expert in transgenderism. I struggle to understand so much of it, and the science is conflicting. When in doubt, however, I try to err on the side of kindness, mercy, and compassion. That's what we're dealing with. Republicans have vetoed these bills. Some Republicans, because they care about compassion. And by the way, the governor also said 75,000 high school kids participate in sports in Utah. 4 transgender kids play sports in Utah. 1 transgender student playing girls sports. That's what this is about. This is a continuation of culture wars. They wanted to ban abortion care, ban books, and now ban kids playing sports. Next question.
Quick follow-up on the debt ceiling. Where are you guys on the concept of a debt ceiling increase that is not something that has anything, big, small, and you're not going to negotiate with me. And I don't want to negotiate here. But where are you? Could Democrats support, in theory, a debt ceiling increase that has something else on it?
We are always willing to have conversations with our Republican colleagues. And like I said, when it comes to debts and deficits and spending, we're happy to have those conversations. In the budget committee, if Republicans choose to put up a budget blueprint or a budget, which we hear may not happen, I don't know. I learned some of that information from you all. If Republicans want to put up a budget, we're happy to look at that. If Republicans want to put top line bills up and talk about our appropriations process, we're happy to engage in those efforts as we have in the past. When it comes to the full faith and credit of the United States and paying our bills, those are separate conversations. The United States should stand for and always has stood for paying our bills. I think the American public realize that. I look forward to our Republican colleagues hopefully getting to that realization. We'll see. Speaker McCarthy says he has the votes for this, so we'll see what Republicans can put up and what they can pass. Thank you guys so much. You want to take one more? Go ahead. Yeah. Sorry.
On the budget one more time, you keep asking for Republicans to release their budget, but President Biden missed his statutory deadline to release a budget. Did that set a bad precedent?
No, not at all. The president put together a budget. He submitted it. It is frequently late. I think presidents of both parties have frequently missed those dates, just like the date mentioned for April 15th for Republicans. If they want to say that they're going to put a budget out May 1, we welcome that as well. I'm not certain that that's what I'm hearing. But you can tell us what you're hearing. We would appreciate if Republicans put forward a plan like they said they would, but that's not within our caucus. That's within their conference. Thank you so much.